Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. Read his coverage of the Phillies offseason at 97.3 ESPN.com. Every rumor, every signing at Frank Klose with a K on Twitter. Let's start with this, Frank. As Machado's name is out there a lot, we know the ties with McPhail. The Phillies' name and Machado's name have been together for a long time now. It's going back to last year. Oh, they're going to go after him. First off, the likelihood that they get a trade done with the Orioles before this season start would be what?
That's a tough one. The Orioles traditionally have not moved players that the owner, Peter Angelos, likes. And the thing that's different this time is that Angelos sent his son to the winter meetings, who is in the room. They're actually listening to offers. I tend to think that this might actually happen in terms of the Orioles being willing to trade him. And then the Phillies are kind of confronted with the question, do they make a play now and perhaps, try again in a year? Or do they, the problem is if they let Machado be traded to somebody else, they might lose the opportunity to sign him as a free agent. So, if he goes to, say, the Cardinals or something, Cardinals are a team that's frequently mentioned in conjunction with Manny Machado. And let's say he really likes it there, and by July they sign him to an extension, then the Phillies never really had a shot. So I think if you're the Phillies, if you really, really like Manny Machado, which I think they do, I think they need to watch this very closely, see if he's attainable for them. And the word is that the Phillies would want a negotiating window to see if they could extend him. John Heyman of FanRag Sports is saying that they probably won't grant them that window. But the Phillies have to at least listen if he's somebody that they really, really want, because at the same time, Bryce Harper, as we learned this afternoon too by his agent Scott Boras, there's actually been some talks with the Nationals about an extension for Harper. So if you might get to this wonderful free agent class when the time actually comes and there's really not anybody left.
What kind of prospects, what kind of names are we talking about to make a deal for Machado?
Well, the two big ones that are going to come up, and no matter who you ask, or probably just speculate on them, are Scott Kingery and Sixto Sanchez, the two big prospects in the Phillies system. Now, I don't think the Phillies would want to give up both for somebody like Machado. You might be able to pry away one of them, if you get to a situation where they really think that they have a shot at extending him. And it's really hard. It's going to be hard for the Phillies to give up either player because both of them are very, very promising. Some scouts have compared Sanchez to Pedro Martinez. Certainly Kingery, he's hit at every level he's been. Both of them are very, very promising, perhaps even more so promising than any of the young players that have come up so far. So it would be difficult for the Phillies to trade them, but they might be willing to do so if they can somehow get an extension here.
Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. Isn't Machado the kind of player at 25 years old that teams yearn to get their hands on? Like, isn't he the kind of guy that if you can make a deal for him, you try? So should the Phillies be trying to be creative, even if they don't want to give up both their top prospects? You backload it with other guys. I mean, is there a deal to be made that you think the Phillies should be working on tirelessly to try to get a deal done for this kind of kid?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. At 25 years old, a lot of people hit free agency and they're already 30. You don't really want to sign a 30-year-old to a 6-year deal. But a 26-year-old, if he's a free agent a year from now, that's not so worrisome, right? Because he still has sort of the best years of his career still ahead of him if you go by when players traditionally peak.
Right.
But the Phillies trying to see. Here's the thing: they have a lot of really nice players. We can look at Nick Williams and say, wow, he's a really nice player. You can look at Jorge Alfaro; he's a really nice player. Odubel Herrera, definitely above average player. But they really lack that sort of superstar that can really drive the Phillies offense. And if you can add somebody who's 25 years old, has that kind of impact. I mean, you really have to do your best to try to add that one player, even if some of these nice players do have to go. If some prospects do need to be included, and remember, you got to remember too, they're still just prospects. You don't know who they're going to be yet in the major leagues, even though you might feel certain about it, about some of their abilities. But yeah, Machado really fits the bill. And if you look at least where the Phillies could add a player, he seems to, you can put him at shortstop or third base, depending on what
he wants to go back
do.
to short, right?
He does, and that's not really a problem for the Phillies either, because let's say they trade Kingery for him. J.P. Crawford, I think, could easily go over and play second base. So I think that it'll work out fine. And we know that Crawford could also play third base. So I think that, but adding an infield bat, adding that impact of a bat, they're really hard to get your hands on. And any chance the Phillies can to get something like that, in other words, if there's going to be a trade, if the Orioles are willing to trade Machado, the Phillies need to be very, very involved. Otherwise, they may lose their shot in a year from now.
Frank, you talked about second base, shortstop. What about the incumbents?
Well, there are a lot of teams interested in Cesar Hernandez, it seems. Cesar Hernandez seems to fit like a glove with the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. They need players that are lower cost because the likes of Mike Trout and other superstars that they've signed, like Albert Pujols, take up a bulk of their payroll. So they need somebody to play second base who's young, who's controllable, who's still affordable, and Cesar Hernandez really fits that bill. So a team like the Angels, if they can give up some of their prospects, and I broke down on the 97.3 ESPN.com a few of the names that one of the Angels reporters kind of threw out there as a type that the Phillies might be looking from the Angels. It seems like a good match. The Mets are also said to be interested in Hernandez. But the one thing that's pretty clear is as a young player, as a player with 3 years control left at low cost, the Phillies don't want to just give him away, and nor should they give him away because he does have a good amount of value. And then over at shortstop, Freddie Galvis, he continues to be linked to the San Diego Padres. The Padres, one report said that the Padres hope to walk away from the winter meetings with either Galvis or Zach Cozart. I think if I'm the Padres, I probably want Galvis instead of Cozart. Cozart's a free agent. He might cost a bunch more money than they might be willing to spend, especially after adding Chase Headley. But Galvis for them would be a one-year stopgap. They have Fernando Tatis Jr., if you remember his father, Fernando Tatis. He's a shortstop prospect, and he might be a year away. So Galvis is a really nice fit for San Diego. Again, I think the Phillies need to make sure that it's clear to other teams that they're not looking to dump anybody. So if you want to get some of these players who have value, well, then you had better bring value.
All right, let's look at some of the other reports out there. Arrieta, what are the chances there? That seems like a long shot to me. I've read $200 million, 30 years old. Doesn't seem to fit the timeline of this team.
I would agree with that, and that's something I've said on air before. Here's where he might work. So if the Phillies expect to contend in 2018, and you look at 2018's available free agents, you don't necessarily see a pitcher of the caliber of Jake Arrieta. Now, a lot of players, because of his age, a lot of teams, because of his age, may not want to break the bank to that dollar amount that you mentioned. So if you think back to the Chicago Cubs, the year before they were expected to contend, they went and signed John Lester. So they kind of jumped ahead on that so that they would have Lester available for 2016. And hey, look, you won a World Series with them in 2016. So if the Phillies think that they have a shot a year from now, if a lot of teams aren't willing to pony up the money and they think that they can get Arrieta for a reasonable price and for a length of contract that's not too long, well, then they're kind of hanging in the conversation and maybe they can go get him. I don't think they're going to be aggressively going after Arrieta, but with a lot of the impact names out there, I think the Phillies are in a position with money that if they happen to fall into their lap, the terms that are very, very acceptable to them, then they might give him a shot.
Tommy Hunter and Neshek. What's the philosophy going after some of these veteran 2-year deal bullpen arms?
I think it's a good pickup for the Phillies to add players like that. Some 2 veteran arms in the bullpen that have been pretty much a steady hand. I mean, really since we saw what Neshek can do a year ago. In fact, it was one of his better seasons, of course. But even Neshek coming down a little bit from his All-Star season, very reliable veteran arm. Last year the 7th inning was pretty much accounted for, no problem. You never had to worry. And Tommy Hunter might give you the same thing there. He is a veteran arm, very reliable. Isn't going to blow many games for you. He might end up closing a little bit. That's something that remains to be seen. We'll see what the Phillies end up doing. But you remember last year, Hector Neris struggled mightily whenever he was in the 9th inning. If you look at the numbers, he was just – his ERA was almost – I try to remember what it was at the end of the year, but at times it was as high as 9 in the 9th inning. Whereas the other innings he was near dominant. So maybe they need some veteran arms that can step in as closer. But I think the most important thing here is you still are going to lean on some young starters, and you really want them to develop. And having players who can come in behind them, especially if these young starters are only going 5-6 innings at a time, you really want to close that gap so when they exit the game, they feel like they're in the game, that they gave their team a chance to win. And in a way, it's almost demoralizing if you're a young player and you pitch your 6 innings and give up your 2 runs and you're feeling good, and then all of a sudden a reliever gives up the lead. So I think that stability is good for the development of the starters, and in a way it gives you some protection with Hector Neris having been shaky in the 9th inning.
Better shot to get moved, Hernandez or Galvis?
I would say equal. I would not be shocked.
You think they would trade both in the same offseason?
I would. I think it actually, Galvis, I think you really should try to move because you can get something for him, whereas he could walk as a free agent in a year. You have the glut of infielders. And somebody like Hernandez, I've always really, really liked Cesar Hernandez. I think he brings a lot. But if Scott Kingery is ready to rise and there's no major Machado-type deals being made, you might want to let Hernandez bring you some substantial value because again, he does have value, and you're kind of covered. I think that if they do move Hernandez, you'll see them sign a veteran type player who can play a little bit of second base, perhaps before Kingery comes up. If Kingery does not start the year, or there are a couple names out there. Even like a Howie Kendrick. Bring him into camp as a super utility player who can maybe start at second base in the beginning of the year until Kingery gets the number of bats they want at AAA, or as often happens, they delay his clock with his salary. I think they can easily in other words, they can easily bring in another infielder to assist if they can trade both of them. But the Phillies aren't saying that they feel forced to do so. As we saw last year, they did a lot of mixing and matching around the infield with Crawford and playing some second, some third.
Right.
And we saw the AAA. Scott Kingery even moved around a bit. So they're in a good position to do some mixing and matching. But if Kingery is going to be ready, you might as well trade Hernandez if you get his value.
But they don't want to start Kingery at the beginning of the year, right? They're going to Chris Bryant him at the very least, right?
Yeah. You tend to think that that's what they're going to do, but you might send him to spring training again with one of these veteran type players and just say, you're competing to win the position. You know what? He might tear the cover off the ball in spring training and make it so that there's absolutely no way you can send him down, and he wins the job out of spring training. But yeah,
that seems unlikely.
As you said, right. But so I would expect that if they do move Galvis and Hernandez and get something back, there will be a free agent signing who can play up the middle. And again, it could be like a Howie Kendrick type, and Jed Lowry was somebody I was thinking of too. But he's already gotten a contract, and if they really wanted to sign Chase Utley as a bench coach, who knows? Maybe they'll give him a bench job.
what's the this news today on Carlos Gonzalez? I mean, he seems like a guy. It seems like a lot of the names that have come up have been more veteran guys. That you're kind of like, all right, what kind of role would he have? That type of player, not necessarily just cargo. I mean, he's an excellent player, but would he be a platoon guy, an everyday player?
Well, we saw them linked to Carlos Santana too, if you remember.
Yes.
Which would have bumped Rhys Hoskins to the outfield. What I think, if you look at the players that they have right now, not thinking ahead as to who they might get or if they might get Machado in a year, the one thing I'm looking at this lineup that I think it really, really needs is a power left-handed bat. Somebody you can put behind Rhys Hoskins, gives him some protection. And one of the reasons why Carlos Gonzalez might be a really, really good fit is that, despite his 3 All-Star appearances, despite his 3 Gold Gloves, despite his couple Silver Slugger awards he's earned over the years, last year was a pretty down year for Carlos Gonzalez. So he might be a good candidate for what's commonly called a pillow deal, where you give them a 1-year deal. Maybe it is for a substantial amount of money. You are paying him for past performance after all. But that gives Carlos Gonzalez the opportunity to rebuild his value for a year from now. And then he can re-enter free agency perhaps and command more money. So, if you're a player like Gonzalez who had that great track record and all of a sudden had a really down year, you don't want to sell yourself for a long-term deal on the low end. So what you try to do is you get that 1-year deal.
So,
and for the Phillies, and they have a loaded outfield. That's the thing.
Right. I was going to say, so where does he fit in with all the guys? I mean, you're assuming that Nick Williams, Herrera, and Altair are your opening day 3, right?
Correct.
Do you think the opening day 8 is Hoskins, somebody at second? We don't know who, whether it be Hernandez or somebody, as you mentioned, a veteran. Either Galvis or Crawford, Franco, and then the 3 guys I just mentioned, Alfaro.
If you get if you have that lineup, you're missing that left-handed power bat. I mean, Nick Williams gives you some power, but if the Phillies have to platoon Altair and Williams for a while, they can do that. As we saw last year, they like to mix and match. I mean, Odubel Herrera, he'll need his days off too in center, so it may not be a straight platoon. It may be where you see Aaron Altair in center field once in a while. So I think they have a lot of options, and certainly Hoskins can bounce back and forth between the outfield and infield if they need that too. If they sign kind of a power bat for first base,
right?
So I think they have enough versatile players that I think adding one veteran player with a good track record like Gonzalez is good if the situation's right. Now, if some team's willing to pony up a 4-year deal for Gonzalez, no money, well then the Phillies aren't going to be interested.
You wrote a week ago that D. Gordon getting traded helped the Phillies in the trade market. Can you explain? I guess that happens to be with Hernandez.
Right, because a team like the Angels was said to be interested in D. Gordon. And what happened was the Marlins moved him to Seattle, where they made him a center fielder. And so now the teams that have holes, that includes teams like the Toronto Blue Jays, that includes perhaps the New York Yankees in an infielder now. They traded 2/4 of their infield in order to pay for Giancarlo Stanton. So they subtracted Chase Headley at third, and they subtracted at second base Starlin Castro. So there's an opening there. The Mets need a second baseman. So you could be talking about 4 teams that have a gaping hole at second base, and now D. Gordon is not among the options. So that gives the Phillies perhaps a little bit more power in their trading, because there might be more teams involved. So that was quite the surprise. I know it's a surprise to D. Gordon that he was going to be converted to a center fielder for the first time in his life. Yeah. But Seattle certainly, they loved his leadoff bat and his speed. So that just happened to fall the Phillies' way.
Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. A lot of stuff happened. Anything else happening at the winter meetings that surround the Phillies that we should be privy to?
Well, I think we kind of ran through a lot of it. I just think I think we're going to hear a lot more before this is over. The Phillies sound like they're very involved. They're very engaged. They realize that this is a year that they can have a tremendous impact for the upcoming seasons as well. So So even though they don't necessarily expect to contend in 2018, it doesn't mean that if they have an opportunity that they won't strike, because let's face it, they have money. They even have some prospects if they want to trade some. They're in a really, really good position, an enviable position for a lot of teams. That they have that much flexibility, but they realize that they really have about a year to really get those types of impact players, and if they have the opportunity to nab one, they might do it. And you know what? They might even plant some seeds at this winter meetings where some of the free agents like Arrieta, for the reasons we've said, end up signing with them way down the line after their other options have run out.
All right, follow Frank at Frank Klose. Don't forget, 97.3ESPN.com for all the Phillies winter meetings rumors and anything that happens with the Phillies. Frank Klose has it at 97.3ESPN.com. Thanks, pal.
Thanks, Mike.